Hey there, it is Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Radcliffe.
What a pleasure to talk with the president and CEO of Open Door USA. It is Dr. David Curry with us today. If you're watching Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or on the radio. Doc, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Nice to be with you both.
It's good to have you here, and we're excited about talking to you and talking about what Open Doors is doing. And I'd love to start, if we can, just dive right in to the poster that's behind you there. Rick and I both noticed that as we got on right before we started here, and it just caught our eyes. And you were explaining it to us, and it's a really cool piece that you can use to show people what persecuted people look like. Tell us about the poster.
Well, first, a little context. One of the things that I think is hard for believers, Christians here in America, to kind of get into their head is that a believer who's being persecuted in Afghanistan or North Korea, they're just like you and me. Mm-hmm. But there's such a distance, and maybe the name is different. Maybe they're called Ahmad or some sort of a name from that culture. So can't kind of picture it. So this is just a poster that says, hey, I'm persecuted. I'm 15 years old and I'm from India or from Afghanistan. I'm a man, I'm a woman. You know, these are the things that make us human. We have so much commonality. And the thing that we have to remember as those who are followers of Jesus will remember the idea of a body, that we're all the same. We're all the same family. We're all part of a body. Mm-hmm. And we need to, when one part of the body hurts, the scripture says, well, you know, the other part, the rest of the body hurts too. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a realization that I try to remember. I don't want to feel like there's distance between the family. Sometimes it feels that way. Right. So I love to have that picture here in my office.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned you take that with you whenever you speak. Is there a common response that people when you tell them about it, is there a common response that you get?
Well, probably the most common response I get is that it's an eye-opening thing for people when we tell the story. There's a young woman who is in. I shared the story at our press conference when we released the World Watch List, but her name is Zabi. She's an Afghan, but she came to know Jesus. She's from a Muslim background and came to know Jesus just a few years ago secretly. Her father became a Christian and showed her a Bible, led her to Christ. Now she's educated in that culture; it's a big deal. Mm-hmm. She has a job. She's working in industry. She's just like this great human being. And then all of a sudden, the Afghan culture collapses in August. You guys know that story.
Mm-hmm.
Tragically. And then the first day, the Taliban they get a list of prominent Christians and they start to go door to door looking for this young girl. Hmm. Now, when I've had the benefit of knowing some of her backstory and all of that, but she reminds me a lot of my niece, who's a professional young woman. She's 26 years old. She's amazing. She's got all this stuff going for her. And I'm thinking of these two people, like one of them is living in Seattle and the other is living in Afghanistan. One of them's on the run. And the correlations, I think, really bring it home for me. And I hope it for other people as well.
Yeah.
We're talking with, go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, just looking at the list here, I see, especially, Mexico. It says, I live in Mexico. And when I think of the persecuted church, Mexico is not one of the countries that I think of. But it's a good reminder that persecution is everywhere.
Yeah, there's two countries on the World Watch List. And for a little context, we're in, we have a grassroots survey method where we talk to believers in all of these places. And then we build out the survey from the grassroots. Mexico and Colombia are two countries that are sort of surprise people when they see it on the list. One is number 30. The other, I think, is number 43. And what is happening there is you have drug cartels. Every context is different, but in these two countries, you have these drug cartels that are attacking pastors, priests who stand up and say, I'm sorry, your drug trade is killing our kids. We're going to stand against this immorality, and they are attacked for it and many times killed. So the cartels, it's not that the people in Mexico and Colombia aren't even identifying as Christians. Of course, most of them do, but that the cartels are targeting those leaders within the culture.
Wow.
And that's why those are on the list.
Dr. David Curry, Open Door USA, he just mentioned about the World Watch List. The new one is out. I was looking on the list. And I heard an interview with you, I think in 2021, you were talking to Tony Perkins. And I think Nigeria was on the top of the list at that point. I don't know if it was number one, but it was on the top. Number one is Afghanistan, as you just mentioned. Let's talk about that. You've got Afghanistan, North Korea, Somalia, Libya, Yemen. There's 50 of them, but let's take the top three. You give that for awareness, and you help those that are persecuted in those areas. Tell us a little bit about tell us more about how Open Door helps.
Well, what we started to do back, many years ago, we started to release this list, I think in 92. We were using it for internal purposes. What we started all those years ago in smuggling Bibles into the Soviet Union and bringing aid to Christians who were being oppressed by the Soviet Union behind the Iron Curtain. Then we began to expand into China and into the Middle East. So our goal is to stand with Christians wherever they're at and help them to first survive and hopefully over time thrive. So we're the tip of the spear in how we support, you might say, like a secret service in these areas to support Jesus people. We don't do anything uncivil. We just want to bring people Bibles, help them to get the training they need to preach and talk about the gospel and facilitate small groups. So when you talk about the top three, you have these, you basically have a picture of what's happening. I call it like a two-front war. You have two factors. You have the strong government attacking the citizen who wants to be a follower of Jesus and practice their faith. And you have these rogue, tribal, extremist elements. And that is the two pillars of this battle against Christian faith. You have Afghanistan and Somalia. They're both very extreme versions of Islam. You have in Somalia, which is number 3, you have Al-Shabaab is the name of the group, but it's might as well be the Taliban. The ideology is the same, and this Taliban is very extreme. There's ISIS elements now mixed in with it. It's like a coalition of the most extreme Islamic terrorists, but it's also tribal in the sense that these are groups that they're broken out into tribal regions of Somalia, which I've been to some of that and seen it. And these are, it's very rural. So you have these elements that are driving the high levels of violence, because it's not just those two. You have Afghanistan number 1, Somalia's number 3, but then you have Yemen, you have Libya. These are all failed states where these groups, these tribal extremist groups, can kind of take over entire regions. Their one unifying idea is we're going to impose Sharia law on these Christians and get rid of them. They feel totally justified due to their ideology to attack Christians and kill them and or unfortunately I have to say rape, sexually assault women, force them into marriage with these extremist guys. So all of these, we try to document this. And when we give a number of how many people were killed, this is just what we know and what we can document. So it's going to be north of that. When you mention Nigeria, for example, Nigeria has not been number 1. What Nigeria is, though, is the one area, because of the big populations close to each other, where you have these extremists in the north and massive Christian population to the south, and there's this conflict that's happening that brings high levels of violence. So you have more people that we can document killed in Nigeria for their faith. This year, and that's number 7 on the list. It's extremely violent, and that even though since 2004 you've had this 2014 you've had this massive population shift. This what's really truly is a genocide, and the genocide is simply described as when a particular group targets to move a specific population, move them out or to kill them because of their faith or because of their ethnicity. And that's what's happening. These Christians are being moved. Millions of them have moved to the south, and you have this massive level of violence that those that don't want to move out of the north of Nigeria.
And then you have the countries where the government is in control, like North Korea, China, places like
Right.
that. And I was going to ask it. Maybe it's kind of a dumb question, but is it what you guys try to do, getting Bibles in and helping people out? Is it easier to do that in the countries where it's a tribal problem, or where it's a government problem, or is it the same either way? Does that make sense?
It's one thing we don't do too much is talk about specifics, but
Right, 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 right.
it is difficult whenever you look at the top of the world watch list. You're talking about areas that are extremely dangerous for the church there. So we're facilitating it, and we're there. Uh, as much as that's as much as I want to say about it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is, I think, harder in my view when the government controls the borders, the police, the all of the centralized methods of how the people get. For example, in North Korea, they control the food source. There's massive famine, so Christians, they identify who the Christians are. Let me put it this way: they know who the descendants of the Christians are,
Right.
and even those people are the last to get food and support. So they
Wow.
control the food, they control the borders, they have neighborhood watches, they have all of these elements to kind of say, if you're a Christian or you're suspected a Christian or you are the grandchild of a Christian, they go back 3 generations on this.
Wow.
Then you're going to be considered the number one enemy of the state and moved into a rural area with less food. So it's really hard to get into these areas to support them where they control the border. But the problem in the tribal areas, if you can imagine, is that outsiders are more easily identified.
Right. Yeah.
And so you have to find clever ways in which to reach the Christians in contexts like that.
Wow.
Dr. David Curry, Open Door USA. I heard this morning on the news about the starvation going on in Afghanistan, which I mean, all this is heartbreaking. And we talked about the event with Afghanistan. How can folks help? We want to pray, of course, support. What can folks do?
Well, we have a project, opendoorsusa.org. You can go and see some of the ways you can support Christians in Afghanistan. It's not just Christians that are suffering, as you mentioned, because the Taliban has a very medieval interpretation of Islam. Their financial system is collapsing. The medical systems, the education, there are millions of kids now, not quite 4 million kids that are out of school. Most of those are girls, and they're not going back to school. The Taliban make statements at the beginning that said, well, we're going to find a way for girls to go back to school. Well, guess what? The Taliban already controlled 70% of the country. Some people don't recognize kind of what was going on. It's not right to say that we were surprised by what happened. They already controlled the rural areas. Everybody who didn't like the Taliban moved into the city. Kabul went from 500,000 to almost 6 million people.
Wow.
So then when the Taliban takes over the center of the country, it's the center of these cities, it's full of people that they know don't like them, and that the population of Christians is likely going to be in these. So all of the Christians now have left or are on the run. Okay. But we knew that in these rural areas where the Taliban was running things, they weren't letting girls go to school. They were imposing extremist views. They were killing Christians if they found them, suspected them. So the economy is going to collapse. China is going to feed them some line of support. And you're going to have this unholy cabal develop who knows where it's going to go, but it's not going to be good.
That's what I was going to ask you. What do you see coming in the future here? It's just a mess. It's
and just for if people can picture, you have Tajikistan to the northwest. You have Uzbekistan on the border. Then you have Pakistan, which already, I think Pakistan you could see improvement if they ever get some way of revising their cultural viewpoint, because there is a remnant of folks who understand what freedom is. But then you have Iran to the west. So you have the ability for Afghanistan to really cause a lot of havoc and to have what it has been before, which is a launch point for all manner of terrorism. If they can find the people who are living there are gonna have a very hard time. That's why so many millions, not more than just Christians, but moderate Muslims tried to escape there. It's going to be a veil of tears, I'm afraid.
Wow. OpenDoorsUSA.org is the website you can go to find out more information, find out how you can get involved and how you can help the incredible work that Open Doors USA is doing. So what's next on your docket? Are you going back to D.C. anytime soon, or what's going on for you?
Well, we work with every administration to try to make sure they're aware of this. We do give suggestions, some of which they ignore, some of which I hope they'll listen to. So we always want to make sure that in my view, this should be a totally nonpartisan issue.
Yes, you're right.
People's ability to support religious freedom. Can you decide for yourself what you think, what you believe? Can you read something that you want to read a Bible? Okay, these kinds of things. So ironically, it's not as bipartisan as you might think, but we certainly try to be even-handed about it. So we're going to speak out on that. We're trying to make sure that every Christian whose voice can't be heard, that we can tell their story to the best. That's why on the website we have so many videos, so many stories. Not all of it's, we're giving the hard stuff here, but some of it is so inspiring to see how these people are overcoming, how Jesus is real in their life. And I get a lot of encouragement from it. As much as I see of it, I'm not without hope. I just know that it's tough in some of these areas.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few minutes. Do you have a story you can share? I mean, I know you can't give names and specifically, but an encouraging story that's really touched you deeply.
Well, I mean, Libya is number 4 on the world watch list. You have 3 factions tearing that country apart. There's 3 recognized governments, but the one thing that's true is that there are all of these extremists in this failed state, and Christians are not allowed to worship freely. I went into that region some time ago and met with a believer who was organizing small groups and these kinds of things. And when to meet with him in North Africa, I had to go through any number of ways to make sure that I wasn't followed so that he wouldn't be caught and killed. Mm-hmm. The process of doing that, Rick and Dan, is really intense. And so then when I get to this meeting, I'm uptight, I'm nervous, I'm full of fear. But he is like this guy who's so full of the love of Jesus. And it was like meeting him was just like totally transformed. He was laughing and full of joy. And I was just like struck by here I am. I'm totally free. Mm-hmm. I can do whatever I want. In that one context, maybe I was in a little bit of a pressure cooker, but then I know I'm going to go home. But he's not going to have freedom. But yet here he is. His spirit was so strong. And we just talked, we prayed, we sang together. And I was a little ashamed of myself that I guess I probably didn't believe that Jesus was enough in that context. But he had already experienced it. That's what I mean. Just he has been through it. He knows Jesus is enough, even when that's all you've got. And I mean, this guy was just such a testimony to me, and it wasn't really what he said. It was kind of just who he was and how it was coming out of every pore of who he was.
What an inspiring story just to hear that he faces danger every day, but he's good. He knows who's got him, and that's amazing.
And it's the transforming. This is the thing that we forget, because sometimes I think in America, can get so distant from the story. Mm-hmm. Jesus is transforming.
Yeah.
And he's seen that in the toughest situation. Like you're not going to be blessed. You're not going to be wealthier because you become a follower of Jesus in Libya. You're going to lose everything if they find out. But yet it's still transformational. And so, I mean, that is a really powerful idea for me. Whenever something goes wrong, I had a nail in my tire yesterday, and my first thought was like, oh man, why isn't anything going my way? So it's inspiring.
We've heard reports where they even rejoice after they've been persecuted. Imagine that. And I wouldn't rejoice at a nail in my tire either.
No, I wouldn't either.
But the perspective is Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, David. We'd love to have you back. We sure do appreciate what you and your team do around the world helping those folks. Check out the list and all the videos, as David mentioned. I mean, encouraging stories as well. OpenDoorsUSA.org. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.